If you look at certain areas, solar panels, solar technology generally, batteries, electric vehicle technology, semiconductors, other parts of the supply chain, we have in America over the past several decades just watched our domestic supply chain vanish before our eyes. When President-elect Biden called me to ask me to do the job, we talked about being domestically focused and rebuilding from within, which, by the way, we think is the best way to be competitive globally. So it's about investing in talent, investing in research and development, making sure that we can compete globally by having stronger technology internally in America.
In the domestic agenda, are there areas where you think, this would be a great area, that Chinese investment might work, that might help?
We are, at this point, experiencing kind of good collaboration with the Chinese as it relates to climate. So I think that that is an area where our goals are aligned. And we know that in order to hit the President Biden's climate change targets, we're heavily dependent on technology. Like the technology necessary to hit his climate goals doesn't exist today. I can't emphasize this enough. On a case-by-case basis.
Sure.
It depends on who is the investor, is there state involvement, what are their goals, and we are serious about protecting our national security.
Let me ask you kind of how you come to your thinking about international trade and China in particular. As I understand it, your father used to work at Bulova, was laid off with Chinese competition. You were the governor and you were the treasurer at a time when the costume jewelry industry got clobbered by Chinese competition. So how much does that kind of factor into the way you think about things?
I think significantly. That was my personal story. It was really hard, right? And Rhode Island, like so many places in the Midwest, in the 80s, 70s, was like a vibrant manufacturing economy. And there was a job there for everybody. And then it all went away in search of cheap labor to China. Cheap labor drove out manufacturing. So the president is committed to bringing that back to America, as am I. It's a big part of my story. In fact, when I was thinking about taking the job, it was a hard decision. And I called my brother and I said, the president wants me to do this. And he said, Gina, Dad would be so proud if you could play a role in getting manufacturing going again in America. So for me, it's a huge motivator.
Would you imagine taking delegations of CEOs or senior business officials abroad, to look at export or even investment opportunities? Is that something you think you would do?
Yes, absolutely. A big part of my job is export promotion. And I'm looking, for example, we're launching a clean tech export promotion initiative. We really want to do a better job helping American businesses export their clean technology. Any place that I see market interference by state actors or other governments, or unfairness or an unlevel playing field for American companies trying to access global markets, that is definitely a huge part of my job, to kind of stick up for American industry.
Would China be one of the places you imagine taking, you expect to take CEOs?
I think so, yes. Once travel opens, Asia and China are very important markets. Obviously, a part of my day every day is talking to American businesses. The Chinese market is huge and growing. And they don't play by the rules. They're not living up to their phase one purchase commitments. They rip off our intellectual property. There's all kinds of barriers that they're putting in place which prevent American businesses from accessing that market. So I plan to be a forceful advocate on behalf of American business, and yes, to ramp up our direct engagement with my counterparts in China and bringing businesses there.
So it doesn't sound like you agree with the idea of the two economies decoupling.
Absolutely not. I don't really think that's an option. I mean, the size and scale of their economy is such that we need access to that market, and they need and want access to this market. So we need robust commercial engagement with China that does not in any way ever compromise our national security.
This administration has talked about cooperation in some areas like climate. Do you think then in the trade and economic area we're in the cooperation basket or the, let's just say, confrontation basket?
A little of both. You know, cooperation is the goal, but we can't be taken advantage of, right? So if they're going to block our companies, if they're going to flood our market with cheap steel and aluminum, which hurts our steel and aluminum industry, if they're going to not respect protection of intellectual property, well, then we'll be confrontational when we need to be. But also, we need to do business there, you know, and that's something that I think it's just an economic fact. It's complex and it is fraught. Communication helps. I think a lot of communication helps. I actually think robust commercial engagement will help to mitigate any potential tensions. You know, if we could continue our commercial engagement, it will help prevent unintended conflict, which can come from lack of communication.